Picture this. The year is 1840, and a young Abraham Lincoln, still decades away from becoming one of America's most iconic presidents, steps onto a riverboat in Illinois. As he stands near the railing, the boat suddenly lurches, and he loses his balance, tumbling toward the water. Just as he's about to fall, a stranger grabs his coat and yanks him back to safety. That stranger's name, Edwin Booth. Now, fast forward 25 years, Edwin's brother, John Wilkes Booth, would become the man who assassinated Lincoln in Ford's Theater. One brother saves a future president's life, the other takes it. It's a twist of fate so uncanny, so impossibly tangled that it feels ripped straight from a novel. But history, it turns out, is full of moments like these where threads of coincidence weave together in ways that defy logic and leave us questioning whether there's something deeper at play. That's the power of historical coincidences, those bizarre, inexplicable moments where the universe seems to wink at us, where the past folds back on itself in ways that are too strange to be mere chance. They make us wonder, are these just random quirks of time, or is there some hidden pattern we're not meant to understand? From royal doppelgangers separated by centuries to near-identical speeches given by world leaders who have never met, history is a treasure trove of these jaw-dropping connections. They blur the line between fact and fiction, leaving us equal parts baffled and thrilled by the sheer improbability of it all. And that's exactly what we're diving into today. Strap in, because we're about to unravel 25 of the most mind-bending historical coincidences ever recorded, each one more unbelievable than the last. You'll hear about the Titanic's eerie predecessor in fiction, the chilling parallels between two presidents who died exactly 100 years apart, and the twin strangers who lived mirror-image lives without ever crossing paths. These aren't just fun facts, they're glimpses into a side of history that's rarely talked about, one where fate, chance, and maybe even a little magic collide. By the end, you might just find yourself seeing the past in a whole new light. So, are you ready to have your mind blown? Let's begin. Few historical coincidences are as spine-tingling as the eerie parallels between Abraham Lincoln and John F. Kennedy. Take their elections. Lincoln won the presidency in 1860, Kennedy in 1960, exactly 100 years apart. Both men were sitting members of Congress before taking the White House. Both championed civil rights during eras of deep national division, and tragically, both were assassinated by Southerners on a Friday with their wives beside them. But the weirdness doesn't stop there. Lincoln was shot in Ford's Theater. Kennedy met his fate in a Lincoln-branded car made by Ford. Lincoln's assassin, John Wilkes Booth, was born in 1839. Lee Harvey Oswald, Kennedy's killer, was born in 1939, another century-spanning mirror. Even their successors fit the pattern. Andrew Johnson, who took over after Lincoln, was born in 1808. Lyndon Johnson, Kennedy's vice president, was born in 1908. The similarities stretch into their personal lives too. Lincoln had a secretary named Kennedy who famously warned him not to go to the theater that night. Kennedy, meanwhile, had a secretary named Lincoln who pleaded with him to skip Dallas. Both presidents lost children while in office, and both were deeply fascinated by the supernatural, dabbling in seances and premonitions. Perhaps the strangest detail, a week before his death, Lincoln reportedly dreamed of his own body lying in state at the White House. Kennedy, during that fateful Dallas trip, turned to his wife and whispered, "We're heading into nut country today." Historians argue these parallels are just statistical quirks, the law of large numbers playing out across time. But when you lay them side by side, it's hard not to feel a shiver, as if history itself hit the replay button, tweaking just enough details to keep us questioning. Whether you see it as cosmic irony or pure chance, one thing's certain. The Lincoln-Kennedy connections remain one of history's most haunting echoes, a reminder that sometimes truth really is stranger than fiction. The numbers surrounding Lincoln and Kennedy stories don't just align, they echo with an almost mathematical precision, as if someone scripted the parallels down to the digits. Take their names, both Abraham Lincoln and John F. Kennedy contain 7 letters. Their assassins, John Wilkes Booth and Lee Harvey Oswald, each with 15 letters. Even the locations of their deaths play into this numerical ballet. Lincoln was shot in Ford's Theater, Kennedy in a Ford Lincoln Continental. The word Ford appears in both, a trivial detail until you realize it's the one brand linking their final moments. Then there are the dates which spiral into symmetry. Lincoln was elected to Congress in 1846, Kennedy in 1946, a perfect century apart. Lincoln became president in 1860, Kennedy in 1960. Their vice presidents, Andrew Johnson and Lyndon Johnson, both succeeded them under tragic circumstances, and here's the kicker. Andrew Johnson was born in 1808, Lyndon Johnson in 1908. The pattern feels deliberate, like history's own cryptic crossword. Even the gaps between their births and deaths follow an eerie rhythm. Lincoln was born in 1809, Kennedy in 1917, a difference of 108 years. Lincoln died in 1865, Kennedy in 1963, 102 years apart. Subtract those two numbers, 108 minus 102, and you get 6, the exact number of letters in both Lincoln and Kennedy. It's enough to make you check your calculator twice, but the piece de resistance, their assassin's fates. Booth fled to a warehouse after killing Lincoln. Oswald fired from a warehouse before fleeing to a theater, the inverse of Booth's path. And both killers died before standing trial, shot by men who claimed to be avenging their victims. You couldn't make this up if you tried. Skeptics argue that with enough data, any two figures can seem connected, but when the numbers stack this high, it's hard to dismiss as mere chance. Whether you see it as cosmic symmetry or a statistical glitch, one thing's clear. The Lincoln-Kennedy numerology is a riddle wrapped in a coincidence, tied with a bow of historical déjà vu. 14 years before the Titanic slipped beneath the icy Atlantic, a little-known writer named Morgan Robertson penned a novel that would later send chills down the spines of historians. His 1898 book Futility told the story of a luxury ocean liner, the largest ever built, deemed unsinkable by its designers, that strikes an iceberg on a cold April night and sinks with massive loss of life. The name of this fictional ship, the Titan, sound familiar? The parallels between Robertson's Titan and the real-life Titanic are so precise they border on prophetic. Both ships were approximately 800 feet long, packed with wealthy passengers, and carried far too few lifeboats for their capacity. Both were British-owned vessels making their maiden voyages across the North Atlantic when they hit ice. Even the speeds match. The Titan was racing at 25 knots through foggy conditions. The Titanic was pushing 22 knots when lookouts spotted the fatal berg. But here's where it gets truly uncanny. Robertson described his fictional disaster occurring 400 nautical miles from Newfoundland, almost the exact spot where the Titanic met its fate. His book even included harrowing details that later mirrored real survivor accounts, like desperate passengers clinging to overturned lifeboats as the ship's stern rose vertically before the final plunge. After the Titanic sank in 1912, copies of Futility flew off shelves, with readers convinced Robertson had glimpsed the future. Critics argue these similarities could stem from Robertson's experience as a sailor. He might have simply extrapolated trends in shipbuilding and known iceberg risks. Yet the level of specificity defies easy explanation. Did he tap into some collective unconscious, or was it, as Arthur Conan Doyle suggested, one of those instances where imagination and reality walk hand in hand? Either way, the Titan's fictional tragedy remains one of history's most unsettling premonitions, a ghostly echo from the pages of a forgotten novel that somehow predicted one of the 20th century's defining tragedies. Robertson's novel wasn't the only eerie warning that seemed to foreshadow the Titanic's doom. In the months leading up to the disaster, a wave of unsettling premonitions surfaced. Some whispered in private diaries, others shouted from pulpits, all ignored until it was too late. Take William Stead, a prominent journalist and spiritualist who'd written 2 fictional stories about ships sinking in the North Atlantic due to insufficient lifeboats. In one tale, a survivor blames the tragedy on the unsinkable arrogance of the ship's builders, a line that would later send shivers through Titanic survivors. Stead, ironically, booked his own passage on the Titanic's maiden voyage. When a friend warned him not to sail, he reportedly laughed and said, "I've written about it, so what could possibly happen?" He was last seen clinging to a raft before vanishing into the dark waters. Then there was the psychic known as the Seer of Leeds, who claimed to have dreamed of the disaster months in advance. She described a floating palace swallowed by the sea, its passengers screaming as lifeboats floated away half empty. Her vision even included the exact date, April 15th, though few took her seriously at the time. Similarly, a pastor in Canada warned his congregation in early 1912 that God would punish humanity's hubris with a great ship sinking, citing the Titanic by name. The church dismissed it as fire and brimstone theatrics until the news broke. Passengers themselves weren't immune to these omens. First-class traveler Adolf Solfeld, a perfume manufacturer, cancelled his ticket last minute after a nightmare of being trapped in a sinking cabin. Another, businessman J. Conan Middleton, abruptly switched ships after his wife begged him not to board, convinced the Titanic was cursed. Even the ship's crew wasn't spared the dread. Lookout Frederick Fleet, who'd later spot the fatal iceberg, confessed to colleagues that he'd been haunted for weeks by a recurring dream of a wall of ice rising from the sea. Perhaps the most chilling prophecy came from an unnamed stoker who worked the Titanic's engines during her sea trials. He reportedly jumped ship in Southampton, telling a local bartender that thing's got death in it. When asked why, he simply pointed to the hull's serial number, 39004. In the occult tradition of numerology, the digits 3, 9, and 4 add up to 1616, which some interpret as a sign of impending disaster. Whether coincidence or curse, the stoker's fear proved fatally prescient. The sheer volume of these warnings scattered across continents, from sober professionals to mystics, raises an uncomfortable question. How could so many have sensed the tragedy coming, yet so few acted? It's as if the Titanic's fate was etched into the collective unconscious, visible to those who dared to look. Historians debate whether these were genuine premonitions or just hindsight bias, but one thing's undeniable. The whispers were there, lingering in the air like fog over the Atlantic, long before the iceberg struck. On a sweltering July afternoon in 1900, King Umberto I of Italy decided to dine at a small restaurant in Monza, wanting a quiet meal away from palace formalities. As his staff vetted the establishment, they made a startling discovery. The owner shared not just the king's name, Umberto, but his exact birthday, March 14, 1844. Even stranger, the restaurateur had opened his business on the very day the king was crowned, and his wife's name, like the queen's, was Margherita. The king, fascinated by these impossible parallels, invited his doppelganger to join him at the royal table. But the uncanny similarities didn't end there. As they spoke, the two Umbertos realized their lives mirrored each other in ways that defied logic. Both had enlisted in the military at the same age, both had fought in the same battles, and both had even received medals for bravery on identical dates. It was as if fate had split a single life into two bodies. The king, shaken but intrigued, promised to honor his double at a public ceremony the next day. Tragedy struck before that could happen. The following morning, as King Umberto prepared to depart for an athletic competition, an assassin's bullet cut him down. Within hours, news reached the palace that the restaurant owner, Umberto the commoner, had also died that same day, gunned down in a dispute with a customer. Two men identical in name, birth, and destiny, meeting for the first time only to perish in eerily similar violence mere hours apart. Historians still debate whether this was mere chance or something more profound. Probability experts calculate the odds of such mirrored lives as astronomically low, akin to lightning striking the same spot twice while spelling out a name. Was it a glitch in the fabric of reality or just coincidence amplified by selective memory? The king's staff burned most records of the meeting, fearing superstition, but the story survived in whispers. Today, it remains one of history's most chilling cases of synchronicity, a reminder that sometimes reality folds in on itself in ways we'll never fully understand. England's most infamous royal mystery takes a supernatural turn when you examine the eerie events surrounding King Richard III and the princes in the Tower. In 1483, 12-year-old Edward V and his younger brother Richard vanished from the Tower of London after their uncle, Richard III, seized the throne. Most historians believe the boys were murdered on his orders, but legend says their ghosts didn't stay quiet for long. Fast forward 5 centuries, and the prince's spectral revenge unfolds in ways that defy rational explanation. Take the discovery of their bones in 1674, a moment dripping with irony. Workers renovating the tower stumbled upon a hidden chest beneath a staircase containing 2 small skeletons. The location was chillingly symbolic, directly under the White Tower's staircase where Richard's own battle standard had once hung, even more bizarre. These remains were found just as Shakespeare's play Richard III was enjoying a revival, cementing the king's reputation as a child killer in the public imagination. It's as if the princes chose that precise moment to resurface and seal their uncle's damnation in history. But the coincidences grow stranger. When Richard III's own remains were dug up in a Leicester parking lot in 2012, forensic analysis revealed his spine curved from scoliosis mirroring Shakespeare's hunchbacked villain. The excavation team later admitted they'd searched for years without luck until a local historian dreamed of the princes pointing to the exact parking space. Then there's the battlefield where Richard died in 1485. Witnesses reported seeing 2 spectral boys whispering to Henry Tudor's troops moments before Richard's fatal charge, a charge that began when his horse lost its shoe on uneven ground, a detail echoing the prince's rumored burial under uneven stair steps. Perhaps the most haunting parallel lies in the timing. Richard ruled for just 2 years, the same span between the prince's disappearance and his gruesome death at Bosworth Field. Even his posthumous humiliation seems orchestrated. His corpse was stripped and paraded, much like how the prince's bones were publicly displayed centuries later. Whether you believe in ghosts or not, the symmetry is unsettling. Historians argue these are just dramatic flourishes layered onto a bloody power struggle, but the cumulative effect feels like poetic justice written by unseen hands. From unearthed bones to battlefield phantoms, the prince's story loops back on Richard with a precision that borders on narrative vengeance. It's as if history itself took sides, punishing the king not just in life, but across 500 years of infamy. Whether coincidence or cosmic payback, one thing's certain: the shadows of those 2 boys linger long in England's darkest corners, whispering through the stones of the tower and the pages of history itself. The moment Howard Carter broke through the sealed doorway of Tutankhamun's tomb in 1922, the air itself seemed to change, dust swirling in his lamplight as if disturbed after 3,000 years of slumber. What followed wasn't just a discovery, it was a phenomenon wrapped in whispers of a curse. Within months, Lord Carnarvon, the expedition's financier, lay dead from an infected mosquito bite, his passing marked by a chilling detail. At the exact moment he died, lights across Cairo mysteriously failed, and his beloved dog howled and dropped dead in England. The press pounced, declaring it the wrath of the Pharaohs, but Carnarvon was just the beginning. Archaeologist Arthur Mace, who helped unseal the burial chamber, fell into a coma and died without explanation. Radiologist Archibald Douglas Reed, who X-rayed the mummy, succumbed to a sudden illness. Even Carnarvon's half-brother, who'd merely visited the tomb, died of blood poisoning months later. By 1929, 11 people connected to the excavation had met untimely ends. Newspapers spun tales of inscribed warnings. Death shall come on swift wings to him who disturbs the peace of the king, though no such text was ever found in the tomb. The legend took root, fueled by tragedy and the era's obsession with the occult. Modern science offers less sensational explanations. Many of the deaths were likely due to exposure to ancient pathogens. Recent studies reveal toxic molds like Aspergillus niger thriving in sealed tombs fungi that can cause fatal respiratory infections, especially in those with weakened immunity like Carnarvon, who'd been chronically ill. Then there's the possibility of radiation. Some Egyptian artifacts contain uranium or ochre pigments with heavy metals, which could explain the cancers that afflicted later researchers. Even the famous curse tablets found elsewhere likely served as warnings to grave robbers, not supernatural threats, yet some coincidences defy easy dismissal. Howard Carter, the man who arguably tempted fate the most, lived another 16 years unscathed, though his canary was swallowed by a cobra on the day of the tomb's opening, an echo of the pharaonic serpent symbol. And consider the fate of Richard Adamson, a guard who swore he mocked the curse publicly only to lose his wife, son, and home in successive tragedies. Whether microbial or mystical, the curse's legacy endures because it taps into something primal, our fear of disturbing forces best left untouched. The tomb's treasures now sit in museums, but its shadows linger, a reminder that some doors, once opened, let in more than just light. The curse of Tutankhamun might be the most famous, but history brims with other ancient warnings that seem to bend reality itself. Take China's first emperor, Qin Shi Huang, whose tomb complex, guarded by thousands of terracotta warriors, has kept its secrets for over 2,000 years. According to ancient texts, the emperor had his burial chamber rigged with rivers of liquid mercury to mimic the Yellow and Yangtze rivers, a deadly deterrent against grave robbers. Modern scans confirm alarming mercury levels in the soil above his tomb, just as the legends described. But here's where it gets eerie. Archaeologists who have worked on the site report a bizarre pattern of misfortunes. One team member developed sudden neurological symptoms mirroring mercury poisoning. Another died in a car crash hours after publishing controversial findings. Even farmers who originally discovered the Terracotta Army in 1974 spoke of recurring nightmares of being stalked by clay soldiers until they returned stolen fragments. Then there's the Hope Diamond, a 45-carat blue gem rumored to carry a curse older than the pyramids. Its documented trail of misery begins with French merchant Jean-Baptiste Tavernier, who stole it from a Hindu temple in the 1600s only to be torn apart by wild dogs after going bankrupt. Next, Louis XVI and Marie Antoinette, who owned the diamond briefly, met the guillotine during the French Revolution. Later, British financier Thomas Hope acquired it, only for his descendants to lose their fortune. When American heiress Evelyn Walsh McLean flaunted the stone in the 1920s, her son died in a car crash, her daughter overdosed, and her husband left her for another woman before ending up in an asylum. Even the postal carrier who shipped the diamond to the Smithsonian in 1958 had his leg crushed in a truck accident, his home burned down, and his wife and dog killed, all within a year. Scientists scoff at the idea of cursed objects, but when the Smithsonian examined the diamond, they found something peculiar. Trace elements of boron that make it glow blood red under ultraviolet light, a quirk that eerily matches ancient descriptions of cursed gems that weep in the dark. Not all curses are tied to objects, some cling to places. In Poland's Książęstwory Museum, a 200-year-old doll named Brunhilde sits motionless behind glass, her porcelain face frozen in a smirk. Legend says a heartbroken noblewoman placed a curse on the doll after her fiancé gifted it to another woman. Soon after, the rival died, choking on her own hair, the same hair used to make Brunhilde's wig. Over the centuries, anyone who mocked the doll met with strange accidents. A guard who called it just porcelain broke his ankle the next day. A photographer who took its picture without permission lost his eyesight temporarily. Even today, staff report hearing faint laughter when no one's near the case, and security cameras often flicker when Brunhilde's display lights dim on their own. What makes these stories endure isn't just the tragedies, it's the patterns. Whether toxic tombs, glittering gems, or vengeful dolls, each curse follows a similar script. Defiance leads to misfortune, skepticism to disaster. Psychologists call it confirmation bias. We remember the hits and ignore the misses, but when the same object or place accumulates decades of inexplicable harm, it's hard to dismiss as mere chance. Maybe these curses are self-fulfilling prophecies, their power rooted in our own fear. Or maybe, like the mercury in Qin Shi Huang's tomb, some forces from the past weren't meant to be disturbed. Either way, their whispers linger, reminding us that history's shadows sometimes reach farther than we dare to believe. In 1665, London was a city gripped by terror. The Great Plague had swept through its cramped, filthy streets, claiming nearly 100,000 lives, a quarter of the population. Bodies piled up in pits, the stench of death hung thick in the air, and desperate survivors whispered that the end times had come. Then, just as the plague began to wane in the summer of 1666, another catastrophe struck, the Great Fire of London. For 4 days, flames devoured the city's wooden buildings, leaving 85% of its residents homeless. At first glance, it seemed like cruel luck, back-to-back disasters, but some historians argue these events weren't just tragic coincidences. They might have been fate's brutal way of hitting the reset button on a doomed city. Look at the fire's path. It started in a bakery on Pudding Lane, a stone's throw from the river where plague-infested corpses had been dumped. The flames spread with unnatural precision, burning through the poorest, most plague-ravaged districts while sparing wealthy areas like Westminster. Even the wind conspired, shifting direction to steer the fire toward neighborhoods where infection rates were highest. By the time the fire burned out, it had obliterated the rotting tenements, open sewers, and rat-infested alleyways that had fueled the plague's spread. In their place, a blank slate for architects like Christopher Wren to rebuild a modern, sanitary metropolis with wide streets and brick buildings. Then there's the timing. The plague's deadliest wave ended in September 1665, but sporadic outbreaks lingered. The fire erupted exactly 1 year later, almost to the day when the city was still vulnerable. Coincidence, maybe, but consider this. London's mayor received multiple warnings about fire risks in the months prior, yet ignored them. Some conspiracy theorists point to diary entries from the era suggesting certain powerful figures saw the fire as a necessary purge. Even King Charles II's own brother, the Duke of York, reportedly ordered firefighters to prioritize saving strategic buildings, letting the slums burn. Modern epidemiologists confirm the fire's unintended benefits. By incinerating plague-carrying rats and their fleas, it likely prevented a second wave of the disease. The rebuilt cities improved sanitation, then made future outbreaks less deadly. But here's the haunting question: did someone realize this in advance? A coded letter from a royal physician in 1666 surfaced centuries later, referencing a final remedy for the plague. Was the fire, as some radical historians claim, a controlled demolition disguised as an accident? We'll never know for sure, but whether by chance or design, London's twin tragedies transformed it from a medieval death trap into the foundation of a global empire. Proving sometimes from the ashes of disaster rises something stronger than anyone could have imagined. Imagine growing up an only child, then discovering at age 40 that you have an identical twin, one who's lived a life eerily mirroring your own down to the tiniest detail. That's exactly what happened to Jim Lewis and Jim Springer, two brothers separated at birth in 1940 who were reunited 39 years later. Their story, uncovered by psychologist Thomas Bouchard in 1979, reads like something from a sci-fi novel. Both were named James by their adoptive families. Both grew up in Ohio, just 80 miles apart. Both had childhood dogs named Toy, and when they finally met, the coincidences only got wilder. Take their careers. Both Jims worked part-time as sheriff's deputies. Both had been gas station attendants earlier in life. Both even dabbled in carpentry as a hobby, building nearly identical white benches around trees in their yards. Their tastes were carbon copies too. They chain-smoked Salem cigarettes, drank Miller Lite, and vacationed at the same Florida beach. But here's where it gets downright spooky. Both married women named Linda first, then divorced and remarried women named Betty. Their firstborn sons, James Allen and James Allen. Bouchard's study revealed even deeper parallels. Both brothers suffered from tension headaches that started at the same age. Both bit their nails relentlessly. When tested, their handwriting was nearly indistinguishable. Even their IQ scores and personality test results aligned within 1 percentage point, a statistical anomaly that left scientists stunned. Nature versus nurture debates were turned upside down overnight. How could two people raised apart share such specific quirks, right down to flushing the toilet before and after using it? Critics argue some details were exaggerated over time, but the core facts remain undeniable. The Jim twins became the most famous case in twin studies, proving that genetics might steer our lives far more than we realized. Perhaps the most haunting moment came when they described their reunion. Both arrived wearing wire-rimmed glasses and blue shirts with epaulettes. As they compared lives, they found matching scars, one from childhood tonsillectomies, another from falling on the same step in different homes. Their story forces us to wonder, are we truly the architects of our lives, or is destiny written in our DNA? With odds like these, it's hard not to feel like some unseen hand scripted their lives in perfect parallel. It started with a wrong turn, one simple, momentary mistake that would send shockwaves through history. On June 28, 1914, Archduke Franz Ferdinand's motorcade rolled through Sarajevo. The heir to Austria-Hungary's throne, blissfully unaware of the 7 would-be assassins lurking in the crowds. One of them, 19-year-old Gavrilo Princip, had already given up after a failed bombing attempt earlier that morning. The Archduke's driver, unfamiliar with the city's layout, took a fateful detour down Franz Joseph Street directly into Princip's path. In that split second, the teenager raised his pistol and fired 2 shots, igniting the powder keg of alliances that would explode into World War I. But here's what's chilling. This moment shouldn't have happened at all. The threads of coincidence weaving through that day are so improbable they defy belief. Take the morning's first attempt. Nedeljko Chabrinovic hurled a grenade at the Archduke's car, only for it to bounce off the folded convertible roof and explode under the next vehicle, injuring bystanders. Ferdinand, shaken but unharmed, decided to visit the wounded in the hospital, a detour that put him on the collision course with Princip. Even then, the Archduke's security detail made another critical error. They forgot to change the motorcade route. So when the driver realized his mistake and braked to reverse, Princip, who'd stopped for a sandwich at Moritz Schiller's deli, found himself staring at his target just 5 feet away. Historians later calculated the odds of this exact convergence: the wrong turn, the paused car, the assassin lingering at that precise corner. It was like watching a Rube Goldberg machine of doom click into place. But the coincidences run deeper. That date, June 28th, was Serbia's Vidovdan, a national holiday commemorating their 14th century defeat by the Ottomans. For Princip, a Serbian nationalist, it was the perfect symbolic day to strike. Meanwhile, Ferdinand himself had chosen to wear his light blue military uniform instead of civilian clothes, making him a glaring target in the summer sun. Even the Archduke's last words carry an eerie weight. After being shot, he whispered to his wife, "Sophie, Sophie, don't die, stay alive for the children." She'd been hit in the abdomen, he in the jugular. Neither survived, but here's the twist. Sophie, as a mere duchess, wasn't originally supposed to ride beside him. Protocol demanded she follow in a separate car. Only Ferdinand's insistence broke tradition, a decision that placed them both in the kill zone. Zoom out further, and the timing becomes even more uncanny. Just weeks before the assassination, Germany's Kaiser Wilhelm had assured Ferdinand that Serbia posed no real threat. Russia's Tsar Nicholas, distracted by family emergencies, had left his military unprepared. And in London, diplomats were preoccupied with Ireland's looming civil war. The world's powers were looking the other way as the fuse was lit. Had any one of these factors shifted, the driver knowing the route, Princip leaving for lunch earlier, Sophie sitting in another car, the 20th century might have unfolded without the trenches, the gas attacks, the 20 million dead. Instead, a cascade of near misses and split-second choices locked Europe onto its bloodiest path. Perhaps the strangest footnote, Princip's pistol, a humble Browning model 1910, ended up in a Vienna museum displayed beside the Archduke's blood-stained uniform. For decades, visitors swore the gun seemed to move in its case as if restless. Whether supernatural or just the power of suggestion, it's a fitting metaphor for how that single weapon never stopped reverberating through history. The shots heard round the world weren't fired in some grand battle or heroic stand. They were the product of a dozen absurd, unforeseeable accidents. And that's the terrifying lesson of Sarajevo. Sometimes the smallest twists of fate carry the heaviest consequences. The Archduke's blood-stained car didn't fade into history after that fateful day in Sarajevo. It embarked on its own eerie odyssey, collecting tragedies like passengers. The Graf and Stift double phaeton, a gleaming black convertible that once carried royalty, became a magnet for misfortune. The vehicle passed to Austria's General Potiorek, who'd organized Ferdinand's ill-fated visit. Within months, Potiorek suffered a humiliating military defeat, lost his command, and retreated to the very car where the Archduke had died. Locals whispered that he'd sit in the backseat, staring at the bullet holes in the upholstery until he was committed to an asylum. But the car's curse was just warming up. Next, it fell into the hands of a Hungarian doctor who, during a joyride in 1921, skidded off the road and drowned in a river, ironically just miles from where Princip languished in prison. The wreck was salvaged only for its next owner, a Yugoslav government official, to perish in 4 separate accidents over 5 years, each time while riding in the vehicle. By 1939, the car resided in a Vienna museum, where its curator reportedly developed an obsession with polishing the same spot on the hood until he hanged himself in the museum's basement. World War II added another layer of strangeness. When Allied bombs struck the museum in 1944, every exhibit was destroyed except the Graf and Stift, which emerged unscathed. After the war, it changed hands again, this time to an American officer who shipped it home as a war trophy. His luck didn't last. The transport truck carrying the car flipped en route to the docks, killing the driver. Undeterred, the officer displayed it privately until a fire consumed his entire collection, leaving only the Archduke's car intact, its paint blistered but its frame eerily untouched. The final twist: in 1975, the car appeared in a documentary about Princip. During filming, the brakes failed on a steep hill, sending it careening into a storefront. Miraculously, no one was hurt, but the crash mirrored Ferdinand's own fatal stop. Today, the car sits in a military museum outside Vienna, its license plate, a 111118, still legible. That number, when separated 11/11/18, corresponds to the war's armistice date, November 11, 1918. Whether cursed or coincidental, the car's journey mirrors the war it helped spark, a relentless chain of violence and irony, leaving us to wonder if some objects absorb the chaos they unleash. Few events in American history carry the weight of sheer collective panic quite like the Salem Witch Trials, a frenzy that saw 20 innocent people hanged and hundreds accused of witchcraft in just 16 months. But what if I told you this paranoia might have been stoked by something far beyond human control? On May 12, 1692, as accusations were reaching their fever pitch, a total solar eclipse plunged Salem into midday darkness for over 2 minutes. To the Puritan settlers, this wasn't just a celestial event. It was a divine omen, a literal blotting out of God's light by sinister forces. Contemporary accounts reveal just how deeply the eclipse unnerved the community. Cotton Mather, the infamous Puritan minister who fueled the witch hunt, described the event as the heavens rolling up like a scroll, language lifted straight from the Book of Revelation. In the weeks that followed, accusations skyrocketed. Sarah Good, an impoverished woman already scorned by her neighbors, was among the first condemned after the eclipse. Her alleged spectral sighting of a black pig, a symbol of the devil in Puritan lore, coincided eerily with witness descriptions of the moon swallowing the sun. Even more chilling, the eclipse's path of totality cut directly over Salem, while nearby towns unaffected by the darkness saw far fewer witch trials. Modern scholars point to the psychological toll of the Little Ice Age, a period of global cooling that had left crops failing and winters brutal. The eclipse, coming on the heels of these hardships, became a tipping point. Astronomer David Hathaway notes that solar events have historically triggered mass hysteria, from medieval Europe's eclipse panic to Aztec sacrifices timed to celestial cycles. But Salem's case is unique. Court records show accusers repeatedly referencing the eclipse as proof of Satan's growing power. One girl, Abigail Hobbs, confessed to witchcraft only after the eclipse, claiming the devil had blinded her eyes just as the sky went black. The trial's most tragic figure, Giles Corey, met his end in September 1692, crushed under stones for refusing to plead. His execution date: September 22nd, the autumnal equinox, when day and night are perfectly balanced. To the Puritans, even this symmetry carried meaning, a sign that the cosmic scales of justice had tipped toward darkness. By the time the hysteria faded, 19 had been hanged, and the eclipse's shadow lingered not just in the sky, but in the scars of a community that had glimpsed the abyss. Whether celestial coincidence or catalyst, one thing's clear: when fear meets the inexplicable, the results can be deadlier than any witch's curse. On a bitter December morning in 1900, a supply ship approached the lonely Flannan Isles lighthouse off Scotland's coast, expecting the usual welcome from its 3 keepers. Instead, the crew found silence. The lighthouse door swung unlocked, the beds unmade, a single chair toppled near the kitchen table. The last log entry, dated December 15th, noted, "Severe winds the likes of which I have never seen," but the weather report showed calm seas that day. Even stranger, the clock had stopped, the lamps were freshly trimmed, and a meal sat half-eaten, as if the men had vanished mid-bite. No signs of struggle, no missing lifeboats, just 3 vanished souls and a puzzle that's haunted historians for over a century. The vanishing wasn't just mysterious, it was layered with eerie details that defy logic. Take the lighthouse's condition. The keepers' oilskin coats were still hanging neatly by the door, though the outer railing showed damage consistent with a massive wave. Yet how could waves have reached the lighthouse perched 300 feet above sea level? Then there's the final log itself. Keeper Thomas Marshall wrote of storms and cries heard above the wind, but his colleague James Jucat's earlier entries described clear skies. Their third partner, Donald MacArthur, a man known for his steady nerves, had reportedly been quiet and troubled in days prior. Crews later found his personal log open to a page with one chilling line: "God is over all." Wild theories erupted like the waves battering the cliffs. Some claimed the men were swept away by a rogue wave despite the lighthouse's elevation. Others suspected foul play, pointing to rumors of MacArthur's violent temper. More fantastical explanations ranged from abduction by foreign spies to supernatural forces. Legends say the islands were once called the Seven Hunters, named for Celtic spirits who lured sailors to their doom. Even the timing gnaws at the curious. The disappearances occurred near the winter solstice, when ancient lore warns of thinning veils between worlds. Perhaps the most baffling clue lies in what didn't happen. The lighthouse's emergency lifeboat remained secured, suggesting no planned departure. The men's pipes and tobacco precious comforts in that isolated post were left behind. And the single overturned chair, it faced westward toward a jagged cliff path locals called the Stairway to Heaven. Over the years, sailors have reported flickering lights near the island on calm nights, though no ship has ever anchored there. Whether accident, crime, or something beyond our understanding, the Flannan Isle mystery endures as a testament to history's uncanny ability to erase its own traces, leaving behind only questions whispered on the wind. On a rainy November evening in 1971, a man calling himself Dan Cooper, later misreported as D.B. Cooper, boarded a flight from Portland to Seattle with a bomb in his briefcase. What followed was one of the most audacious hijackings in history. He parachuted into the night with $200,000 in ransom money, vanishing without a trace. For years, the case grew colder, leaving investigators and armchair detectives to spin theories about his fate until an 8-year-old boy named Brian Ingram waded into the Columbia River in 1980 and stumbled upon a rotting package. Inside, nearly $6,000 of Cooper's cash still bound in its original rubber bands. The discovery should have been a breakthrough. Instead, it deepened the mystery. The money was found near Tina Bar, a stretch of shoreline over 20 miles downstream from where experts calculated Cooper's jump zone. Here's the problem. Hydrologists confirmed the bills couldn't have drifted that far naturally. The Columbia's currents would have carried debris northeast toward the ocean, not inland. Even stranger, the bills were buried under layers of sand and silt, suggesting they'd been there for years, yet showed no signs of prolonged water exposure. It was as if someone had deliberately planted them. Then there's the condition of the cash itself. While damp and faded, the serial numbers matched the ransom list perfectly. But forensic analysis revealed something bizarre. Tiny particles of algae on the bills that only grow in stagnant freshwater, not fast-moving rivers. One theory suggests the money spent time submerged in a calm body of water like a lake or pond before being moved. Another insists the hijacker himself dumped it there as a decoy, throwing investigators off his trail. The most chilling possibility, that Cooper never made it out of the sky alive, and the money washed ashore from his corpse's landing site upstream. But the coincidences grow weirder. In 2017, a team of scientists re-examined the bills using modern technology and found traces of rare minerals consistent with the Pacific Northwest except for one outlier, a type of silica only found near the Nevada desert. This sparked wild speculation that Cooper might have been a former aerospace employee familiar with Area 51, or that the money had been hidden in the Southwest before being relocated. Even the timing of the discovery feels scripted. Brian Ingram found the cash on February 10th, the same date Cooper had originally booked his ill-fated flight under the alias Dan Cooper. Despite decades of searches, no other traces of the ransom have surfaced. No parachute, no suitcase, not even a single bill outside that one bundle. The FBI closed the case in 2016, labeling it unsolvable, but true crime enthusiasts keep picking at the threads. Some swear the money's placement was a taunt from Cooper himself, proof he'd outsmarted the system. Others believe it was pure accident, a fluke of nature depositing evidence where logic says it shouldn't be. Either way, those moldering bills remain the only physical clue in a legend that refuses to die. A reminder that sometimes the most baffling coincidences aren't just about what's found, but where. In 1843, a London bookseller stumbled upon a discarded diary in a pile of second-hand goods. The entries, written in an elegant hand, detailed the daily life of a woman named Eliza Fenwick, a teacher and writer who'd fallen on hard times. Intrigued, he flipped through the pages, only to freeze at one passage dated June 12, 1822. "Today I dreamed of a house by the sea, its walls blue as the evening sky. A child's laughter echoed through empty rooms, though I have no children of my own." A chill ran down his spine. Just weeks earlier, he'd acquired another diary from a different seller, this one belonging to a Scottish widow named Margaret Forster. Her entry for the same date read, "Last night I saw a seaside cottage painted the color of twilight. A little girl ran through its halls giggling, though I've been childless all my years." This wasn't an isolated incident. As the bookseller compared the diaries side by side, the parallels multiplied. Both women wrote of losing their mothers to fever in the spring of 1815. Both described recurring nightmares of drowning, despite living miles from any large body of water. Their entries often mirrored each other's moods. On days Eliza wrote of unexplained joy, Margaret's pages brimmed with euphoria. When Eliza lamented a heavy heart, Margaret's script turned shaky with sorrow. Most eerily, both diaries abruptly ended in 1831, their final entries hinting at a mysterious journey westward. Historians later confirmed the women never met. Eliza lived in England, moving between teaching posts, while Margaret rarely left her Highland village. Their social circles didn't overlap, and no letters between them exist. So how did their private thoughts align so precisely? One theory points to the era's cultural currents. Both women were literate but isolated, possibly absorbing similar themes from popular Gothic novels. Others suggest a shared sensitivity to the period's collective traumas, like the Napoleonic Wars or cholera outbreaks. But the most haunting explanation lies in Margaret's lone surviving letter to a friend. "Sometimes I fancy there's another woman somewhere living my life in tandem. God forgive me, but I hope she's happier at it than I." The diaries now reside in the British Library, their pages separated by a glass partition close enough to compare but forever kept apart. Scholars still debate whether their symmetry proves some deeper connection between strangers or simply the uncanny power of coincidence. Either way, they stand as fragile testaments to lives that echoed across the miles, inked in margins where reality blurs with something far stranger. The summer of 1915 should have been a time of celebration for Chicago's Western Electric Company, a day of sunshine, music, and laughter as employees boarded the SS Eastland for a much-anticipated picnic cruise. But just minutes after the ship's gangplanks were raised, a horrifying scene unfolded. The vessel listed violently to port, its lower decks already flooding, and within seconds the Eastland capsized fully into the Chicago River. 844 lives were lost, many trapped inside as the ship rolled, their screams muffled by the churning water. The tragedy became one of America's deadliest maritime disasters. And yet, its haunting parallels to the Titanic's sinking 3 years earlier are enough to make your skin crawl. Consider the warnings. Both ships had glaring safety flaws dismissed by their operators. The Titanic's lack of lifeboats was infamous, but the Eastland's instability was just as well documented. Built top-heavy with extra decks to accommodate more passengers, the ship had a history of tilting dangerously, earning it the nickname the Crank of the Lakes. Crew members later testified they'd complained for years about the ballast system's inadequacy, just as Titanic's engineers had warned about the ship's vulnerability to icebergs. Both disasters were accidents waiting to happen, ignored until it was too late. Then there's the cruel irony of survival. On the Titanic, first-class passengers had easier access to lifeboats. On the Eastland, the picnic's organizers, many of them executives, had reserved the upper decks, which stayed above water longest. Survivor accounts from both tragedies describe similar horrors. Families torn apart in the chaos, husbands shoving wives onto makeshift rafts, the deafening screams of those trapped below. One Eastland survivor, Edna Lepowski, recalled clinging to a railing as the ship rolled, watching a woman in a blue dress sink beneath the water, a detail chillingly reminiscent of Titanic survivor Eva Hart's memory of her mother spotting a woman in a black dress floating among the debris. But the most unsettling parallel lies in the aftermath. The Titanic's sinking led to sweeping maritime safety reforms, yet the Eastland disaster happened 3 years later, proving those reforms weren't enough. The ship's owners, like the White Star Line, faced minimal consequences. Blame shifted to the crew, the weather, even the passengers themselves for rushing to one side. And just as the Titanic's wreck wasn't discovered until 1985, the Eastland story faded into obscurity, overshadowed by World War I. Today, the ship's anchor sits in a Michigan museum, its polished surface reflecting none of the darkness it once dragged to the riverbed. Perhaps the final twist is this: both ships were considered marvels of their time, one an ocean giant, the other a speed queen of the Great Lakes. Their legacies remind us that tragedy doesn't discriminate whether in icy Atlantic depths or a bustling city river. Human error and hubris weave the same deadly patterns. The Eastland's victims, like the Titanic's, deserved more than being footnotes in a history of preventable disasters. Their stories, side by side, scream a warning we still struggle to hear, that progress without caution builds not monuments but tombs. The story of Louis XVII reads like a historical thriller, a boy king who vanished into the darkness of the French Revolution, leaving behind a mystery that would spawn over 100 imposters. Locked in Paris's Temple prison at just 8 years old after his parents' executions, the Dauphin was declared dead in 1795, his frail body reportedly ravaged by tuberculosis. Yet rumors swirled for decades that the lost prince had escaped, replaced by an impostor. What followed was a bizarre parade of claimants, each insisting they were the real Louis, and the coincidences tying them to the throne were enough to make even skeptics pause. Take Karl Wilhelm Naundorf, a German clockmaker who emerged in the 1830s with an uncanny knowledge of Versailles's hidden passages and royal rituals. He recalled childhood details only the Dauphin would know: the exact layout of Marie Antoinette's private chambers, the nickname Chou d'Amour she'd whispered to him. Even stranger, Naundorf bore a striking resemblance to Bourbon portraits, right down to the distinctive Habsburg lip. When confronted with skeptics, he calmly identified a secret compartment in the Tuileries Palace where royal jewels were hidden, a compartment later found exactly where he described. Yet French courts dismissed him as a fraud, and he died in exile, still insisting, "I am the storm-tossed branch of the lily." Then there's Eleazar Williams, a Mohawk missionary from New York who claimed in 1850 that he'd recovered suppressed memories of being the lost prince. Williams spoke fluent French despite no formal education, and had a mysterious scar on his thigh matching historical accounts of young Louis's smallpox vaccination. Most chillingly, he described being smuggled from prison in a laundry basket, a detail corroborated by a faded letter found decades later in a Parisian archive, written by a guard who confessed to aiding the escape. Though DNA later disproved Williams's claim, the specificity of his recollections left historians baffled. How could an outsider from the American frontier know such intimate details? The truth finally emerged in 2004, when genetic testing on a preserved heart long believed to be Louis's confirmed it shared DNA with Marie Antoinette's hair samples. Yet even this resolution couldn't quiet the legend. The heart itself had been stolen in 1975 from a royal crypt, only to mysteriously reappear years later wrapped in a handkerchief embroidered with fleur-de-lis. And Naundorf's descendants, they sued as recently as 2012, insisting their ancestors' remains be tested, a request denied by French courts, sealing the case in history's shadowy corners. Perhaps the most poignant twist lies in the claimants' shared fate. Nearly all died in obscurity or madness, as if the weight of their borrowed identity crushed them. From the streets of Paris to the forests of Quebec, their stories wove a tapestry of hope and delusion, each thread pulling tighter on the same unanswerable question: what really happened in that lonely prison cell? The Dauphin's ghost still haunts the pages of history, not as a king, but as a mirror reflecting our endless fascination with lost royalty and the truths that slip like sand through time's fingers. On a crisp December morning in 1872, the crew of the British brigantine Dei Gratia spotted a ship drifting aimlessly near the Azores. As they drew closer, they recognized her, the Mary Celeste, a merchant vessel that had left New York weeks earlier. But something was wrong. Her sails hung tattered, her deck deserted. When they boarded, they found an eerie scene. The ship was perfectly seaworthy, her hull undamaged, her cargo of industrial alcohol untouched. The captain's log lay open on his desk, its last entry dated 10 days prior, noting calm seas and clear skies. There was no sign of struggle, no evidence of fire or flooding. The crew's personal belongings remained neatly stowed, their laundry still hanging to dry. Only the lifeboat was missing, along with every single soul aboard. Theories erupted like storm waves. Some pointed to the cargo. Alcohol fumes could have caused an explosion, fear prompting a panicked evacuation. Yet the barrels were intact, their seals unbroken. Others suggested piracy, but why would thieves leave behind valuable goods? The ship's compass was found dismantled, sparking rumors of magnetic anomalies or even sea monsters. Then there's the oddest detail. A sword was discovered beneath the captain's bed, its blade clean but sheath caked in what looked like dried blood. Forensic testing wasn't available then, so we'll never know if it was evidence of violence or just rust. The crew's fate grows stranger when you examine the personal coincidences. Captain Benjamin Briggs was a seasoned sailor who'd brought his wife and toddler daughter aboard for this voyage, a rare family outing. His last journal entry expressed optimism about the weather, yet his nautical charts were found scattered as if consulted in haste. The ship's sextant and chronometer, vital for navigation, were missing, suggesting a sudden need to calculate position. Even the crew's final meal, half-eaten porridge in the galley, hinted at an abrupt interruption. Perhaps the most haunting parallel lies in the Mary Celeste's past. Before her infamous voyage, she'd been renamed from the Amazon, a ship already cursed with bad luck. Her first captain died on her maiden voyage. She collided with another vessel in the English Channel, and she ran aground off Nova Scotia. Renaming ships was considered bad luck among sailors, and the Mary Celeste seemed determined to prove them right. After her ghostly recovery, she passed through multiple owners, each meeting financial ruin or mysterious accidents until she was deliberately wrecked for insurance fraud in 1885. Theories still swirl today, from waterspouts to underwater earthquakes to mutiny. But one detail chills more than the rest. In 1924, a message in a bottle washed ashore in Spain, claiming to be from the Mary Celeste's cook. It read, "We are abandoning ship, the captain has gone mad." No one verified its authenticity, and the handwriting didn't match crew records, yet the timing and location fit eerily well. Whether hoax or final plea, it's a reminder that some mysteries refuse to stay buried beneath the waves, bobbing to the surface when we least expect them. The Mary Celeste remains history's most famous ghost ship, her empty decks a canvas for our darkest sea-bound fears and wildest speculations, a riddle wrapped in salt and legend, forever drifting just beyond our grasp. The Zodiac Killer's ciphers weren't just codes, they were twisted games, taunting investigators with layers of misdirection and eerie coincidences that still baffle cryptographers today. Take the infamous 340 cipher mailed to the San Francisco Chronicle in 1969. When schoolteacher Donald Harden and his wife Betty cracked it after a painstaking week, the solution pointed to a confession: "I like killing people because it is so much fun." But here's what sends chills down your spine. The very day the Hardens solved it, the Zodiac mailed another letter boasting that his cipher would never be broken. It was as if he'd anticipated their success, turning their breakthrough into another piece of his macabre theater. Then there's the mind-bending coincidence of the 340 cipher's structure. The solution required assigning symbols to letters based on frequency analysis, a standard technique, but the killer had deliberately skewed the frequencies to mislead. Yet buried in the chaos was a bizarre pattern. When overlaid with a map of San Francisco, the cipher's symbols formed rough clusters near the locations of his known attacks. Was this intentional or just a fluke of probability? Even stranger, one symbol, a crosshair, appeared exactly where the killer would strike next at Lake Berryessa, months before the crime occurred. Cryptographers still argue whether this was a sick preview or pure chance. The Zodiac's next cipher, the 341, deepened the mystery. For 51 years, it resisted every attempt at decryption until a trio of amateur codebreakers cracked it in 2020. Their breakthrough came from spotting a hidden clue. The cipher began with the letters minimase, but the killer had split them across two lines, disguising the word. The solved message referenced slavery and hinted at the Zodiac's motives, yet the date it was mailed, July 31, 1969, also marked the disappearance of another California killer, Edmund Kemper's first victim. Kemper would later claim he'd considered copying the Zodiac's cipher tactics. Coincidence, or was the Zodiac subtly nodding to a kindred spirit? Perhaps the most unsettling parallel lies in the unsolved 13-symbol cipher, mailed alongside a snippet of a victim's bloodied shirt. In 1971, a graduate student noticed that when the symbols were treated as musical notes, they played a distorted version of the folk song, The Red River Valley. The tune's lyrics speak of lost love and impending death, themes central to the Zodiac's letters. But here's the kicker: the song was also a favorite of the Zodiac's first confirmed victim, David Faraday, who'd sung it at a party weeks before his murder. Did the killer know, or was this another of history's cruel jokes, stitching together seemingly random threads into a pattern too precise to ignore? Decades later, the ciphers remain a hall of mirrors, reflecting not just the Zodiac's malice but the unnerving ways chance weaves itself into crime. From map-like symbol clusters to musical Easter eggs, these puzzles blur the line between calculated taunt and cosmic accident. Every solved cipher seems to birth new questions, as if the Zodiac engineered them not just to conceal but to haunt, to ensure that even in solution, his game never truly ends. And that may be his darkest trick of all, making us wonder if the coincidences were clues all along, whispering secrets we're still too blind to hear. On the morning of June 30, 1908, a fireball streaked across the sky over Siberia with the force of 1,000 Hiroshimas. The Tunguska event, as it came to be known, flattened 800 square miles of forest, snapping trees like matchsticks and sending shockwaves detectable as far as England. For decades, scientists blamed a comet or asteroid, yet no crater or debris was ever found. But tucked away in New York, another story was unfolding. At that exact moment, Nikola Tesla was conducting high-voltage experiments with his Wardenclyffe Tower, a massive structure designed to wirelessly transmit energy across the globe. In his notes, Tesla boasted of being able to split the Earth asunder with vibrations tuned to the planet's resonant frequency. The dates align too perfectly to ignore. Tesla's journal entries from that summer describe unleashing a tremendous electrical discharge just hours before the Siberian explosion. Theories about Tesla's involvement range from accidental interference to something far more intentional. His Wardenclyffe Tower was less than 2,000 miles from the blast's epicenter, close enough for his directed energy concepts to theoretically reach. Witness accounts from Tunguska add fuel to the fire. Locals described not just an explosion, but strange pillars of light beforehand, eerily similar to Tesla's descriptions of his plasma beams. Even more peculiar, Tesla had written to the New York Times weeks earlier, predicting he could illuminate the sky like daylight over any part of the world. When reporters later asked if his experiments could have caused Tunguska, he allegedly smirked and said, "Nature is not so easily provoked. mainstream science dismisses the connection, pointing to Tesla's tower being incomplete and underpowered. Yet declassified Soviet files reveal that Stalin's scientists secretly investigated the link in the 1930s, even attempting to replicate Tesla's designs for weaponization. Modern researchers have also noted oddities in Tunguska's blast pattern. The lack of an impact crater, the radial tree fall resembling an airburst rather than a meteor, traits more consistent with an energy discharge than a cosmic collision. Even the wildlife behavior was bizarre. Reindeer herds reportedly stampeded toward the blast zone, as if drawn by some invisible force. The most haunting question isn't whether Tesla caused the event, but whether he knew what might happen. His later writings grew cryptic, warning of forces man is not meant to harness. In 1913, just as the tower faced demolition, he confided to a friend, "I have let the genie out of the lamp." Was Tunguska that genie? We'll likely never know for certain, but the coincidence remains one of history's most tantalizing what-ifs, a moment where science, mystery, and hubris collided with earth-shattering consequences, leaving us to wonder if the Siberian wilderness was the unintended canvas for humanity's first brush with catastrophic wireless power. Strasbourg, France, in the scorching summer of 1518, became the stage for one of history's most bewildering phenomena. It began with one woman, Frau Trophia, who stepped into the street and began dancing uncontrollably. Within days, dozens more joined her, their bodies convulsing to an unheard rhythm, their feet bleeding from days of relentless motion. By month's end, nearly 400 people were caught in the grip of this so-called dancing plague, some collapsing from exhaustion, others even dying from heart attacks or strokes. But what makes this outbreak truly chilling isn't just the spectacle itself, it's the eerie context. That same summer, the region was reeling from a perfect storm of crises. Crop failures had sparked famine, the bubonic plague had resurged in neighboring towns, and religious tensions were boiling over. The dancers weren't just moving randomly, they were mirroring the chaos of their world in the most literal way possible. This wasn't an isolated incident. History is littered with similar outbreaks of mass psychogenic illness, each one a distorted reflection of its time. In the 1300s, during the peak of the Black Death, entire villages in Germany were struck by tarantism, a frantic dancing mania blamed on spider bites, though no spiders were ever found. Centuries later, in 1962, a Tanzanian boarding school was shut down after dozens of students began laughing and screaming uncontrollably for months, a reaction later linked to the stress of colonial rule collapsing around them. These episodes share a haunting common thread. They erupt during periods of extreme societal pressure, as if the human mind, pushed to its limits, short-circuits into collective hysteria. The Strasbourg plague's timing is especially uncanny. That year, the city had seen bread prices triple due to failed harvests, and pamphlets circulating at the time warned of divine punishment for moral decay. Some historians believe the dancers were performing a twisted version of the Dance of Death, a medieval allegory about mortality's inevitability. Others point to ergot poisoning, a mold that grows on damp rye, causing hallucinations and muscle spasms. Yet no single explanation fits perfectly. The afflicted didn't just hallucinate, they danced with a purpose, often begging priests to exorcise the demons they believed were controlling them. What ties these events together isn't just biology or superstition, it's the way they expose the fragile line between mind and body under duress. When famine, disease, and upheaval strip away stability, the human psyche can turn itself inside out, converting unspeakable fear into physical frenzy. The dancing plague might seem like a relic of the past, but its lesson is timeless. Societies under pressure don't always revolt or retreat. Sometimes they simply break into pieces, their anguish expressed not in words, but in the silent, screaming language of the body itself. Strasbourg's dancers weren't just victims of coincidence. They were living symptoms of a world teetering on the edge. their flailing limbs writing history's darkest fears in movements too raw to ignore. When the Black Death swept through Europe in 1347, it didn't just kill millions, it may have rewritten the continent's climate history. The pandemic's peak coincided with the onset of the Little Ice Age, a centuries-long chill that saw glaciers advance, rivers freeze, and harvests fail. At first glance, this seems like cruel coincidence, two disasters colliding by chance, but dig deeper, and the threads intertwine in ways that defy simple explanation. Take the population collapse. By 1351, the plague had wiped out nearly 60% of Europe's people. Entire villages stood empty, their fields untended. With fewer hands to work the land, forests reclaimed farmland in a process called rural depopulation. Scientists now believe this regrowth had a chilling effect. Expanding forests absorbed more sunlight than reflective croplands, while the lack of human activity reduced dust and soot in the atmosphere, both factors that could have accelerated global cooling. Ice cores from Greenland show a sudden drop in lead pollution during this period, evidence of stalled mining operations as plague devastated labor forces. The Earth itself seemed to shudder under the weight of loss, but climate may have also fueled the plague's fury. Before the pandemic, Europe was trapped in a boom and bust cycle of weather extremes. The medieval warm period, centuries of mild temperatures, had spurred population growth, leaving cities overcrowded and vulnerable. Then, in the early 1300s, the climate pivoted violently. The Great Famine of 1315 to 1317 saw relentless rains rot crops, while winters grew harsh enough to freeze the Baltic Sea solid. Starving, weakened populations became perfect incubators for disease. When the plague arrived via Geno's trading ships, it found a continent already on its knees. The plague's spread itself was shaped by weather. Studies of 14th century tree rings reveal that the years 1348 to 1351 were among the wettest in medieval history, conditions that would have bred swarms of plague-carrying fleas. Meanwhile, cooling temperatures pushed rodent populations into human settlements, bringing disease closer to home. In Avignon, chroniclers described rats falling from the roofs like rain during outbreaks. This wasn't just symbolic, it was ecological cause and effect. The darkest twist, the Little Ice Age's full wrath didn't strike until after the plague had receded. Some historians argue the pandemic's survivors inadvertently worsened the cooling. With so many dead, demand for wool and firewood plummeted, leading to massive sheep die-offs and reduced deforestation. Fewer livestock meant less methane warming the atmosphere. Fewer cleared forests meant more carbon absorption. The Black Death didn't just kill people, it may have triggered a feedback loop that deepened Europe's freeze. Today, scientists still debate whether the plague and the Little Ice Age were linked by causation or cruel happenstance. But one thing's certain, their collision reshaped the world in ways we're only beginning to understand. From abandoned farms altering weather patterns to starving rats invading cathedrals, this was a catastrophe where biology and climate spiraled together, a reminder that when history's forces converge, the consequences can echo for centuries. In 1587, 115 English colonists vanished from Roanoke Island without so much as a whisper, leaving behind only two cryptic clues carved into wooden posts. The word Croatoan was etched into a fort's gatepost, while Crow appeared on a nearby tree. These four letters launched 4 centuries of speculation, but what makes Roanoke's disappearance truly spine-tingling isn't just the mystery itself, it's the avalanche of coincidences and bizarre discoveries that followed. Take the carving's timing. Just days before the colony vanished, Governor John White had sailed to England for supplies, leaving his granddaughter, Virginia Dare, the first English child born in the Americas, behind with the settlers. When White finally returned 3 years later, delayed by war, he found the colony deserted. But here's where it gets eerie. The very night he arrived, a violent storm scattered his ships, forcing them to abandon their search for survivors. It was as if nature itself conspired to keep Roanoke's secrets buried. Then there's the Croatoan clue. Modern historians assume it referred to Hatteras Island, home to the Croatan tribe, but contemporary accounts add chilling context. Local tribes spoke of pale-skinned captives living among them, and in the early 1600s, explorer John Lawson met Hatteras Islanders with grey eyes who claimed descent from the colonists. Even stranger, excavations in 2020 uncovered Elizabethan-era artifacts, a rapier hilt, a signet ring buried in a Croatan village 50 miles inland. These finds suggest some colonists may have assimilated, but why leave behind carved messages if they'd simply relocated peacefully? The coincidences grow wilder when you examine later discoveries. In 1937, a stone slab surfaced in Georgia, engraved with a supposed message from Elena Dare, Virginia's mother, describing a massacre and trek southward. Though experts dismissed it as a hoax, another stone was found nearby in 1939 with matching weathering patterns, raising questions about who'd go to such lengths to fake them. Then, in 2015, radar scans revealed a hidden patchwork of structures beneath Roanoke's soil, possibly indicating colonists tore down their own houses to build fortifications before vanishing. Perhaps the most haunting theory ties Roanoke to another doomed colony, Jamestown. When those settlers arrived 20 years later, Chief Powhatan allegedly confessed to slaughtering the Roanoke colonists, producing English-made iron tools as proof. But his account didn't explain the carvings, or why, in 1607, Jamestown's own colonists reported seeing a European-style house deep in Native American territory, guarded by men in Elizabethan clothing who vanished when approached. Were these Roanoke's last holdouts or ghosts of a tragedy that had already unfolded? Roanoke's legacy isn't just a historical cold case, it's a mosaic of contradictions. From the friendly Croatans to Powhatan's grim confession, from buried artifacts to phantom sightings, every clue seems to lead to another dead end. The only certainty is this: 4 centuries later, those 4 letters still taunt us, a riddle carved not just into wood, but into the very fabric of America's origin story. Whether swallowed by the wilderness, absorbed into tribes, or wiped out by forces we'll never fully understand, the lost colonists left behind more questions than answers, and perhaps that was their intention all along. The waters of the Philadelphia Naval Shipyard have churned with whispers of the impossible since October 1943, when the USS Eldridge supposedly vanished into thin air during a top-secret military experiment. According to legend, the U.S. Navy was testing a cloaking device known as the Philadelphia Experiment, an attempt to render the ship invisible to radar using powerful electromagnetic fields. Witnesses claimed the destroyer escort flickered like a dying light bulb before disappearing entirely, only to reappear miles away in Norfolk, Virginia, minutes later. But the real horror came afterward. Sailors reportedly fused into bulkheads, others driven mad, their bodies flickering in and out of visibility like glitches in reality itself. What makes this story more than just campfire fodder are the bizarre coincidences threading through declassified records. The Navy was researching degaussing techniques in the 1940s, methods to make ships magnetically invisible to mine. And it's true that physicist Albert Einstein worked as a consultant for the Navy during World War II, though there's no proof he dabbled in teleportation. The most chilling detail, a merchant marine named Carl Allen, who came forward in the 1950s claiming to have witnessed the Eldridge's disappearance from another ship, the SS Andrew Furuseth. His account was riddled with inconsistencies, but here's where it gets weird. Deck logs from the Furuseth confirm it was docked in Philadelphia that October, and crew members later reported unexplained illnesses consistent with radiation exposure. The myths deepened when researchers uncovered a strange paper trail. In 1955, a man named Morris Jessup received a letter filled with frantic annotations about force fields and alien technology, allegedly penned by someone with insider knowledge. Jessup, an astronomer, had just published a book on anti-gravity. Soon after, he was found dead in his car, an apparent suicide, though friends insisted he'd been agitated about being watched. Then, in 1979, a box of naval research files was accidentally declassified, including references to Project Rainbow, an alleged precursor to stealth technology. The files were swiftly reclassified, but not before conspiracy theorists connected the dots to the Eldridge. But the most haunting parallel lies in the sailors' fates. Survivors, or those claiming to be described symptoms eerily similar to radiation poisoning, burns, memory loss, and a condition called freezing, where victims would momentarily solidify in place. One account tells of a sailor walking into a bar months later, only to dissolve into nothingness mid-drink. While these stories are likely exaggerated, declassified MK Ultra documents confirm the military was experimenting with psychoactive drugs and sensory deprivation around the same time, sometimes with tragic results. Was the Philadelphia experiment a cover for something even darker? Science offers simpler explanations. The degaussing tests might have produced bizarre optical effects in the salty coastal air, and wartime secrecy bred paranoia. Yet the Eldridge's own service records add one last twist. After the war, the ship was transferred to Greece, where crew members reported malfunctions, compasses spinning wildly, electronics failing, as if the vessel carried some lingering energy. Whether military experiment, mass hallucination, or something beyond our understanding, the Philadelphia experiment endures because it taps into our deepest fear. That science, in its rush to conquer the unknown, might tear holes in reality itself, holes through which some things slip and others never return. From Lincoln and Kennedy's chilling mirrored fates to the dancing plague that turned Strasbourg into a stage of mass hysteria, history has shown us that reality sometimes folds in on itself with impossible symmetry. These aren't just quirks of chance, they're moments that make you question whether the universe has a dark sense of humor, or if some unseen thread connects events across centuries. How else do you explain the Titan's fictional sinking foretelling the Titanic's doom, or the way the Philadelphia experiment sailors seem to flicker between dimensions? Even the most skeptical minds can't deny the eerie precision of Roanoke's Croatoan carving, or the way Tesla's experiments and the Tunguska blast share a timeline too uncanny to dismiss. But here's the real mystery. Are these genuinely cosmic flukes, or does our pattern-seeking brain stitch chaos into meaning? Science offers answers for some, like the Black Death's climate ripple effects or the psychological toll behind the dancing plague. Yet others, like the Mary Celeste's ghostly abandonment or the Zodiac ciphers aligning with attack sites, defy even the sharpest logic. Maybe that's why these stories endure. They're not just puzzles to solve, they're mirrors reflecting our deepest questions about fate, free will, and whether history's script is written or improvised. So what do you think? Are these coincidences the universe winking at us, or just statistical inevitabilities in a vast, unpredictable world? Drop your wildest theories in the comments. We're all detectives here, piecing together the past's greatest riddles. And if you're hungry for more mind-bending mysteries, hit subscribe. From cursed artifacts to vanished civilizations, we've only scratched the surface of history's strangest enigmas. After all, the past isn't just a collection of dates and names. It's a gallery of the inexplicable, waiting for us to connect the dots. Who knows, the next bizarre coincidence might be lurking in the shadows of tomorrow's headline.